That's there you go. And that's each one. Okay, so bunch of friendly, familiar faces. Anybody have any announcements? Anything they want to talk about before we get into the program?
Oh, I'd like to tell everybody about my
Oh,
book is my new book is being published by AFA.
yes.
Yay!
Nice, nice.
Yay!
And you're going to tell us all about it next month, aren't you? And explain the process you went through.
Right.
Tell us what AFA stands for those that don't know.
Association of American Federation of Astrologers.
There we go.
Yes, Patricia. Unmute.
Unmute.
You're amongst friends.
What is the name of the book?
The name of the book is an astrological journey of the United States.
Oh, that one.
It has a brand new birth chart for America. I spent 2 years researching this. So anyway, it's a new chart, and so it's a lot different than the old chart. You know
Good.
that all the charts, the American charts that are out there now are based on the 4th of July, and mine is not. It's in January.
Yeah. July 4th thing always kind of bothered me for a long time, mainly because of the history since the war had already started. And people
Well,
didn't actually,
not only that, but what if they lost?
yeah. And then and as it was, people, the Declaration of Independence wasn't signed then, and it was actually well, we had the Articles of Confederation, and then it was the Constitution that actually established the United States. Because prior to that, we weren't.
Right.
They were, yeah, they weren't even sure what to call us. But okie dokie. Yes, I'm looking forward to that,
We
Cornelia.
weren't sure what to call us, huh?
Yeah.
Does anybody watch Secrets of the Dead on PBS? And it's not scary. It's not meant to be like
Uh,
like they had one on Benjamin Franklin and his where he the years he spent in London, and they were going to and how he was trying to go back and forth and negotiate between the British and the colonists and back and forth. But really, when they were trying to make a museum for him, they were digging in the basement and found old bones that him and another doctor were experimenting on the human body and stuff like that. And but there's all kinds of interesting things in Secrets of the
yeah,
Dead by PBS.
I've watched some of them, not all. It depends on what they're doing, whether
What
the
their
topic
topic
they're
is,
interested
yeah.
in. Yes.
Like
Did you see the documentary on him? Like Ken Burns did on Benjamin Franklin?
I usually watch all of Ken Burns, so I probably have, yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, he's great. Ken Burns is great.
Yeah, but that documentary, I mean, you really got to know old Ben Franklin. He was quite a guy.
Yes, he was.
I didn't realize how much scientific stuff he had done. He really was a scientist.
He was the most famous person in the world, not just in America, in the world.
Yeah.
At that one time.
Yeah, and he was a bit of a ladies' man, was he not?
I was just thinking the same.
Well, I think he was legitimate. I think his son was illegitimate. Yeah.
Yeah, son was illegitimate.
He brought one of them back to Pennsylvania.
He had to have his son arrested because his son stayed on the side of the king and was plotting against the colonists.
Yeah. Okay, getting comfortable. Okay, how are we doing? Where's everybody? And they're not showing up. Okay.
We're here
any other any other announcements? Angie, Rachel, got anything else you want to add? Say, tell us about what's happening?
Just excited.
You're just sitting there patiently waiting for us to start talking about astrology. Well, thank you all for coming. As I have mentioned, I have too many slides. We probably won't talk about all the ladies, but I do have slides. And again, if you want a copy of the slideshow, just drop me an email Jimmy_Eddie@hotmail.com, which is all over the place. JIMMY_EDDY@hotmail.com, and I will send it to you with all the charts and other sundry things in it. One of these times I may actually get ahead of the game and get all this done ahead of time instead of finishing it up 20 minutes ago. All right, are we ready? Anybody
Ready.
got anything else? Okay, feel free to ask questions as we move along. As soon as I figure out what I'm doing, here we go. Oh, I gotta share a screen, don't I? Wait. Here we go. Let me start with a share screen so you can see what I'm doing. Here we go. Share. There we go. And I'm going to start the slideshow. Okay, come on. Here we go. Slideshow. Here we go. There we go. You see, 10 March 2024 meetup, Women's History Month, Total Solar Eclipse. Got it? Y'all with me?
Yep.
Mhm.
Here we go. Okay, so our usual routine, we did a little talk around calendar of upcoming astrological events, and we're going to spend some time talking about Women's History Month and some look at charts of some of the influential women in history, some of whom we may have heard about, some of whom we haven't. Then we're going to talk some eclipses, a little summary Q&A, and a little bit about our schedule of what might be coming up in the future. So tomorrow, Venus enters Pisces, sign of her
Yay.
exaltation. And then Tuesday, we have a very long void of course. Moon runs about a little almost 13 and a half hours. March 15th, beware the Ides of March. You know what happened to Julius? Um, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, Sun conjunct Neptune, 27 Pisces 22. That's their annual get together. Then on Monday the 18th, 8:39 p.m., Mercury at 15 Aries 59 enters their shadow for the coming retrograde, which starts on April 1st. On the 19th, the sun will go void of course, and then a few hours later enters Aries, and we have the spring equinox. On the 20th, Mercury will conjunct Chiron. On the 21st, Venus conjunct Saturn in Pisces. On the 22nd, Mars goes void of course and then enters Pisces, giving us a bit of a crowd in Pisces at the time. On the 25th, we have a full moon. This is a lunar eclipse, 5 Libra 7. Got the chart, so we'll look at the chart, see whether or not we can see it. On the 28th, there will be 5 exact major aspects. April 1st, Mercury stations retrograde at 27 Aries 13. On April 2nd, we have 6 exact major aspects, all by the moon, so it could be a bit of an emotional day for you ladies. The skies, where'd I go? Oh, on the 3rd, 6:10 a.m., Venus will conjunct Neptune at 28 Pisces, and then Venus goes void, of course, entering Aries on the 4th of April. April 8th, we have the new moon total solar eclipse. This one's at 19 Aries 24 with Chiron exactly conjunct, which is a bit of a different kind of experience we can look forward to, and who knows what that might mean. April
Well,
10th.
the south node
Yes.
is going to be on. The south node is going to be on Trump's Jupiter in the second house.
Yeah, well, let's hope that means something bad for him.
Usually means you lose your resources.
Well, he seems to be losing it. He's losing a lot. He's losing not just his resources, but his faculties.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes,
That's
so
true.
let's see. April 10th, Mars conjunct Saturn. It's one of 5 exact major aspects that day. April 11th, we have the Mercury Sun inferior conjunction in Aries. This is when retrograde Mercury will be passing between the sun and the earth. The
That
Venus and
Mercury
Mercury.
in retrograde.
Yeah,
No,
Venus and
I'm
Mercury,
just,
because they orbit between the earth and the sun, make two
I'm
different
just
types of
grumbling when
conjunctions.
Mercury goes into retrograde. I should crawl in a hole.
Okay.
Did you know that Biden had Uranus transiting opposite his Mercury the night he gave the speech?
Oh, really?
What did you
Yeah.
say? What did you say, Cornelia? What?
Biden had Uranus transiting opposite his Mercury when he made the speech,
State of the Union address.
State of the Union.
He got energy from somewhere.
Yeah.
Some of the
Okay, so
Republicans are saying he had been taking methamphetamine, so that's why he had the power. I think it was really.
Yeah, well, they've
yeah,
always
and what would
had to
but
come
what's
up
their
with.
what was their
They're
excuse for the lady they had do the rebuttal speech?
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was on something too. Whoa.
Well, they're
I
always
don't know her
projecting.
chart. Does
They're,
anyone know her chart?
they're always projecting those Republicans.
Oh,
Yes.
that's a good question, Spencer. Her chart. She was Saturday Night Live did a great thing on her yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, they
All right.
really did. And
Here we
No,
go.
I think she was perfect for the Republicans, who's shown in her kitchen. That's where they want
There you
all
go.
women, is in their kitchens.
That's what
Mhm.
women love.
Okay, moving along, people. Keep up. All right, so that's the 11th, and then on April 14th we have our April meetup, and Cornelia will be presenting her new book and theories about a new birth chart for the United States.
Yay!
Yay, very nice.
Yes. In between, as March ends and April begins, we go through a period where there will be a number of the moon will be making several quincunxes to planets as it and energy will be shifting from a waxing, growing energy to the waning, contracting energy. So it could get fun. All right. Any questions about any of those things? All right. Women's History Month. In 1908, a branch of the New York City Social Democratic Women's Society declared that the last Sunday in February would be celebrated as National Women's Day. The observance was first held on February 28, 1909 in New York City. However, the better-known precursor to Women's History Month was International Women's Day, which was created in 1910 at the Second International Socialist Women's Conference. First observed March 19th, 1911, led by German Social Democratic activist Clara Zetkin, who went on to become a communist. National Women's History Month, honorary observance of the month of March. The United States was designated in 1987 by the U.S. Congress in recognition of women's many accomplishments throughout history. A variety of agencies, schools, and organizations observe the month by focusing on the consistently overlooked and undervalued role of American women in history. Libraries and communities promote special events that emphasize the achievements of women. Similar month-long observances occur in other countries. Yeah, there's two types of people in the world, mothers and children of mothers. So that's the key thing to remember. Without you, we would be nothing. Okay, here we go. So here's some famous women that we've got. I've got charts for all of these. Some of them we have, I think there's only one or two that we have good birth data for. Most of them we have a birth date. Some of them we don't even have a good birth date. So that gets we get a little creative, and I have my own way of creating things, and Katerina will talk about her way, I guess. Couple of highlights. Sojourner Truth. Now, that wasn't her name. She was born into slavery in New York. And that kind of tripped my trigger a little bit because it's like,
New York.
yeah, in New York. And it's like, well, wait a minute.
Upstate New
Because we
York.
don't think about it. She was born in somewhere around 1797. New York and most of the northern states did not abolish slavery until the 1820s or 30s.
I have the meeting of that in my book. I have the meeting of that famous meeting of those women when she spoke.
Great. Perfect. Yeah. So she was born into slavery in New York to a Dutch owner. So she grew up speaking Dutch.
Okay. Yeah, New
And
York was
then,
settled by the Dutch.
yeah, and then she learned, so after that, she learned English. So she always spoke English with a Dutch accent,
Mm-hmm.
which would probably be kind of strange when you think about a black woman with a Dutch accent. But, um, and then Harriet Tubman. Now, Harriet Tubman, I'm sure most of us have learned about in our history class back when they taught history. It was actually born into slavery in Maryland. Again,
Can I say
we tend not to think of Maryland as a slave state, but it was.
can I say something about Harriet Tubman?
Sure.
I was in fifth grade in school in New York, Long Island, and we were each assigned something we were learning about American history, and they assigned me Harriet Tubman, and she became my hero. There I was, 11 years old, like I couldn't believe what this woman did. It was like I could never do that. She was like, and that was. I just think New York was a great place to learn about history.
Yes, for
Well,
history, it certainly was.
yes, especially at art. Yeah, I mean, New England, the East Coast, because there was so much history there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so some others that we may have time to talk a little bit about. We have Sacagawea, who actually ended up being a slave at one point in her life as well, when she was captured by another tribe. She led the Lewis and Clark expedition to the Pacific. Olympe de Gouges, French playwright and political activist. I had never personally heard of her until Katharina brought her up. We have Edith Wilson, wife of Woodrow Wilson. Now, she's the second wife.
Mhm.
For those of you, a history refresher here, Wilson, during his second term, suffered a stroke and basically was incapacitated. And so Edith pretty much kind of ran things from his bedside.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like she was the first female acting president, though we may not think of her as such. And then, of course, Eleanor Roosevelt, who most of us have heard about, but now she redefined the role of the first lady and former first lady.
Right.
I saw her speak once. It was
But yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. Wilma Mankiller, most of you have probably never heard of Wilma,
No.
but she was the first woman elected principal chief of the Cherokee tribe. Frida Kahlo, Mexican painter. Most of us have heard of her, some have seen the movie Frida. Sandra Day O'Connor, first woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. Sonia Sotomayor, first Hispanic woman on the Supreme Court. And then Ketanji Brown Jackson, the first Black woman on the Supreme Court. With that, where do I go from here? Oh, here we go. Some astrological symbols. Since we're dealing with some new symbols, and it's like, okay, we all have our favorites.
Hmm.
Yeah, we all use the standard ones, but many of us often have a favorite non-standard, non-traditional object or point that we like to sometimes use. And so um, there's the black moon, which is the lunar apogee, or the point in her orbit where the moon is farthest from the Earth,
Hmm.
also known as Lilith or the black moon Lilith. Estrella, which kind of looks like the percentage sign, Greek goddess of justice. She was the last to leave the Earth for Olympus. And she was placed in the heavens as the signs of Virgo, and in her outstretched arm, the scales of justice, Libra. And what's interesting is where she shows up in the charts of our three jurists.
Mm-hmm.
We have Sedna, the Inuit goddess of the sea, Eris, goddess of discord and sister to Mars, Athena, Greek goddess of wisdom and warfare, and then Haumea, one of the more recently discovered dwarf planets, the Polynesian goddess of fertility and childbirth. And um, just one of us likes to talk about Haumea, so we'll probably learn some stuff about her. All right, how are we doing, folks?
Good.
Ready?
Can I just jump in, Jim, and say Sedna's not only the Inuit goddess of the sea, she's really this representative of indigenous people, certainly indigenous women that find themselves taken hold by the patriarchy and murdered off. So we see this active in the chart of individuals, women, indigenous, and events where there is a massacre or something has gone awry. And Haumea is not only a goddess of fertility and childbirth, she's a trickster goddess where she gives birth to all of the islands of Hawaii and always gets her husband out of trouble. By hook or by crook, she overthrows royalty and the patriarchy and structural systems. So every time we see a person or a chart of an event where the royalty or the powers of authority are outsmarted by hook or by crook, we will see Haumea active and present.
Oh, I guess we may have to look at her and keep an eye on her for the presidential election in the charts.
Oh, yes.
Oh yes, oh yes. Okay, here we go. All right. So here's the chart that I created for Sojourner Truth. Now, and it was I picked. What did I pick it? Oh, I picked it because it was a lunar eclipse. I picked December because, well, I figured, okay, born into slavery, so her mother was a slave. New York, cold winters. That's a good time to have babies because they're not out doing so much field work. But you don't want them you don't want them pregnant and having kids in spring or summertime because that's going to take away from their ability to work. So they may actually time childbirth for later in the year or early, the winter months. That was my weird, Virgo mental old white guy thinking. Okay. Okay. Kat, do you want to take it? Do you want to take over from here?
Oh, well, I was
You
going
want
to
to use?
say just, yeah, well, I like this chart. That's totally fine to hang on to that. This is Sojourner Truth. And I want to say with so many of the women that we're talking about last month, Fani Taifa, Floyd Willis, her name is from the, oh, now it escapes me, African indigenous tribe,
Mhm.
Fani Taifa, the prosperous people. Isabella Baumfree is the name of Sojourner Truth. Harriet Tubman is born with another name. They all have superpowers, and they all go through these changes where, like in the indigenous tradition, they earn a different name. But she is born Isabella Baumfree. Isabella means beautiful. She is beautiful, it is feminine, and Baumfree, born free. So there's something also in the name that she's arrives at. And as Jim said, she is born to, Dutch speaking. She's really fascinating. And I encourage everyone to really do research. She's born in 1797. This is, she has ties, of course, to these long cycles that we've been talking about with Uranus and Pluto in this transition. 1776 is the American independence. The Revolutionary War, 1789, and into the 90s is the French Revolution, 1791 is the Haitian Revolution. So she has ties to this whole cycle. And she was a woman who was an abolitionist, meaning abolishing slavery of African and advocated for African American women rights and women's rights. So she was a very early feminist in the feminist movement, and also worked for alcohol temperance, meaning not drinking. And she became very active with her speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" And this was delivered in 1851 at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention. The 13 original colonies, especially in the North, were chock free of women that were advocates for suffragists, for women's rights. And she advocated for her rights as a woman, even though she was Black. So she's a very fascinating history. This is how we know of her. And Jim, did you want to talk a little bit about the chart or
I
make
was just
comments?
noticing that Yod, the finger of God pointing to Neptune and Mars. The Neptune Mars conjunction, I think, and if this chart is reasonably accurate, in her first house, but even if it's not first house, I mean, it's that is going to have a powerful impact on her because we're talking about the North Node, which is our future, where we're going. It's the path we're on. Jupiter was the greater benefic, um, and Mars in Scorpio, the sign, his other home, conjunct Neptune. Yeah, this is makes for a very powerful woman who's going to go out there and read the word. And they're trining Saturn. So there's just a whole lot going on in this chart. And Saturn is, oh, Saturn's opposing Haumea and Mercury.
Saturn's opposing Mars. The other one is, I just wanted to say, we technically only have her birth year.
Yeah.
So I know you have suggested, and so what I would do with this is I'm going to look at the events of her life, like the 1851. What happens when she delivers the speech of "Ain't I a woman?" She advocates for being a full citizen as a woman and as a African American. So I would, if we don't know the birth month or the day, I would look at events in the life, and I will look at the long cycles. Like, is it Haumea that's the glyph in Capricorn next to the sun?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we still don't know because the sun takes a year to go around. But I would just look at the long running planetary cycles. Like I would look at Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Haumea, Sedna, looking at those. Like Uranus is opposing, is that Sedna at Pisces, 17 Pisces?
Yes.
Okay, so there's again that, so a long run 11,400 year cycle that is opposing, Uranus is transiting to oppose Sedna. So this electrical revolutionary radical energy of Uranus in Virgo. Again, the harvest maiden. Virgo is the virgin, not a person that has not had sex, but a free woman, and her name is Balm Free. Sojourner, a woman who takes a sojourn. She went out preaching suffragism, abolitionism into her communities and advocating for the rights of women and blacks. Opposing Sedna, it describes an indigenous woman that's been cut out of life. So just that, if we just look at one aspect in the long running cycle of her life and her chart, this is highly descriptive.
Yeah. The thing to keep in mind is that the Uranus cycle is like 84 years, which is going to encompass most people, the average or a normal lifetime for most people. Actually, most people probably don't make that old. But everything beyond Uranus, when you get to Neptune, Pluto, and all the dwarf planets out there, Sedna, Eris, Haumea, their time is 3 lifetimes or more. I mean, Neptune is 167 years, so that's almost 2 lifetimes, twice as long as Uranus. And Pluto is almost 3 times as long as Uranus. And so now you're getting into, generational things, the things that we leave to our children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. Yeah, we just had Pluto make its return to its first Pluto return to the United States, July 4th, 1776 chart. So that gives you an indication of just how long some of these cycles are. And, they have a starting point, and so it's a very long cycle. But yes. Okay.
But one thing is, just very briefly, I'm going to point out that when I'm bringing in these asteroids and trans-Neptunian planets, notice the partile conjunctions and connections. It's 17 Uranus, 17 Sedna. So out of an 11,000 year cycle, this is where it lands, Uranus lands, directly opposing. Again, opposition is this overthrowing that energy of the patriarchy, and it's exactly what she's doing.
Yeah.
Cool. Any questions?
Here's Harriet.
Wow.
So we don't have a birth date for her either, though, Jim. So
No,
right?
I know.
Okay.
So I think what I did here was I think she died on March 10th.
Okay. Let me look.
I think I used her. I had her born we know she was born in March of 1882, right? 1822, I mean. I think we have a month and year for her birth, but we don't have a date.
That's right. March 1822, born. March 10th, 1913, born Araminta Ross, Minty Ross.
Right. Yeah. So I picked her date of death as her date of birth, because sometimes, that's when we die. People die on or near their birth date.
Yes. That's
kind of like
absolutely.
waiting for something, or there may be a significant holiday or something. But yeah,
Should I give a few facts?
please.
Okay. So Harriet Tubman is not born again. She's another mythological character. That's so important because her name has changed a couple of times in her life. She is born Arminta Ross, March 1822. She is born into slavery in Dorchester County, Maryland. So this is fascinating times. This is during the struggle of slaves. She escapes slavery. She takes I think it's her mother's name, Harriet. As a child, she suffered a horrible head injury at the hands of her slave owner, which like many people that suffer slave injuries have long or head injuries, certainly as a slave, had terrible headaches, concussion, but it also gave her superpowers. And this is what we've known throughout time. While she has hypersomnia or like sleeping episodes, she had premonitions that led her to escape from slavery in Maryland and return many, many times through the Underground Railroad, liberating hundreds of people. In 1849, she escaped to Philadelphia. So Maryland and Pennsylvania at that time were north was considered Pennsylvania and was free to slaves. The south was considered past the Mason-Dixon line, and she escaped. And she worked with the Underground Railroad in parallel to Frederick Douglass. And during the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, essentially slave owners were permitted to come north into free states and recapture slaves. So this was tremendous. She was the only woman in American history that we know that led a raid as a spy and an armed scout and it's called the raid at Combahee Ferry, which was essentially she was hired on at the beginning of the Civil War to lead this raid, and she was able to liberate 700 people from a slave raid, essentially. So tremendous force. She established property in New York State that provided housing and support for former slaves, and worked tirelessly throughout her life. So
Yeah,
it's just
she's really, by the way, PBS has an hour, at least an hour special on her, if not more. And yeah, I thought she went further north, but she didn't go as far north as I thought she did. But she did work. She escaped herself and then she kept going back for others. And I went to school in Rhode Island, and I got to see the Underground Railroad. If you go into the basements of some of the buildings of the art school, there's the Underground Railroad. And when I went into the house it was like a sorority house, but we didn't have sororities. And I went in the basement, and it was really interesting. This is in Providence, Rhode Island. The basement had these divisions in it. And I think it's where they kept the slaves while they were waiting to send them up to Canada. It was really, Rhode Island was a really big hub for transporting those slaves up north
yes.
to Canada. Yes, it's really, I get goosebumps when I think about it. Yeah, she's amazing.
I love this chart, Jim. I'm interested that you put it for her birthday. And even if it was anytime this month, but it makes sense around one solar return or solar minimum. It's unbelievable that in Aquarius, which is the sign of the working people, Saturn ruled sign traditionally, she has Pallas Athena, Sedna, and Eris. Amazing. And the North Node, all in a stellium in Aquarius, opposing Mars. So there's this 23-24 Leo, Mars, and South Node, which is fascinating. And then the other big stellium, well, two, all of these planets in Pisces, the most spiritually, she is a slippery fish. She was eventually called named herself Harriet Tubman, but she was known by the slave owners as Moses because she could bring them over the water and
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
of the desert into the promised land, which is the
Mhm.
Old Testament Bible story. My goodness, she has this slippery fish Piscean quality, Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Sun conjunct Sedna. Oh my goodness. And then conjunct Pluto. I can't take it. 5 planets. I mean, 1, 2, 3 traditional planets, 1, 2, 3 exterior planets, planetoids, asteroids, Pluto, and Sedna. And then, wow, squaring Uranus and Neptune. What is the dream? What is
Oh.
the vision? She had a vision, literally had visions in her head, in her mind's eye, for how she could transform. She had tremendous faith and a superpower. So she used her Saturn conjunct Jupiter. She was the authority in Aries, tremendous authority. And she ties to the chart of the United States, of course, because look, Chiron in Aries, US has Chiron in Aries. We're going through this Chiron return. If the moon was there, my goodness, Saturn opposing the moon, if that was the correct day, we know that she was either in utero or born or spiritually around this time, right? March 10th.
Yeah.
We don't know for sure, but my gosh, Saturn, the moon opposing Saturn is the people opposing authority. Bang
Yeah.
on. Tremendous.
Christy.
Anyone want to chime in or?
I was just going to say that in my new chart, Haumea sits on the ruler of the chart,
Uh-huh.
of the New American chart that
Oh,
I
that's
have.
fascinating.
Hmm.
That makes sense, Cornelia, because Haumea is Hawaiian goddess.
And
Hawaii.
also Athena.
Oh, and Hawaii is, stolen, colonialized land. So this plays a huge part. So these new asteroids and trans-Neptunian planets are really giving us a rich story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can
Jim?
I offer one thing here?
Yeah.
If I don't know if it's entirely accurate, but I seem to recall that the the great French fortune teller who banged his head. What was his name? Not Zoro. I'm into Zoroaster, but it's Nostradamus.
Mhm.
He fell off a ladder, according to the stuff I read. And after he had hit his head, he started having visions, just like you were talking about her having visions. I thought I'd just toss that in that many people who have traumas like this discover certain powers. And I think you're right. She had a real cognitive advantage after she had the trauma actually delivered by a slave owner, which she masterly now worked against him. I think it was very great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Has anyone else heard that story about her falling? I mean, about Nostradamus hitting his head?
I haven't heard that one.
No. But when you think about it, and the unfortunate thing is, in modern times, most people that have that superpower, have those visions, are generally they get a psychiatric diagnosis of you're crazy, and they get treated as such, um, or they're classified as something other than, to try to classify them under one of the various psychiatric diagnoses. And
Well, look at how many people follow Joan of Arc,
uh-huh.
who had
Yeah.
visions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes crazy people aren't really crazy after all.
Right.
Let me add one more point about the blow on the head. My wife's best friend, her daughter was in an accident where she had to have surgery and on her skull, and they had to do surgery on the bone. And now she is having visions of about the deities or divine. She's suddenly got a Bible and reading it intensely and announcing. I mean, it's certainly an aspect that would show the theory, but it's certainly got Kim, my wife's best friend. She's very worried. Suddenly you have a daughter who's having visions and reading the Bible, whereas before she was on the soccer team in the junior high. So it's she can't do headers, that's for sure. Anyway,
Well,
Yeah.
this is what the Chiron and Aries creates. Aries is literally the head in the medical astrology, physiological astrology. It's the head, but it's also the mind. And this is very typical. Christine de Pizan, Saint Lucia, these ecstatic Saint Francis. The ecstatic saints. People that are suffering from head injuries. I've had the same issue. I told Jim, I've had a head injury. I have a patch of white hair from a concussion. I too, this is very typical. It doesn't surprise me that Harriet Tubman had visions and clairvoyance, clairsentience, where she knew the path to take through many, many miles that could take weeks of walking by foot over river, over gorge. How could one know this? She had to trust on an inner vision and insight that was provided by something more powerful than that she had the deep faith and reliance upon. So we see this many times in charts with a Chiron and Aries. Look for it.
Okay. Anybody got any other thoughts, comments, questions about Harriet Tubman?
I read on Aries.
Let's see. Here we go. Sacagawea. Why did I pick May 2nd? Oh, I don't know. I pulled a feather out of my hat, I guess. Not sure.
well, Sacagawea is a saint. And my mother was born in Lewiston, Idaho, where the Nez Perce Indians spent their summer there because there's some kind of a thing about that particular aspect of the geography of it's on the Snake. A Snake and a Clearwater River come there, and it was a very good place to. There used to be a lot of fish there, so that's how Lewis and Clarkston became an aspect of that, and we all learned a lot about it, about from my mom and stuff about what kinds of ways that they thought that she was such a gift that she she had a baby on this little journey, and they say she just dropped back and came back a couple hours with a kid. I don't know if that's true, but it was what my mother came up with. So anyway,
Can I add a little piece?
Yeah.
Hey, and Jim, I'll add to that because I have the research in front of me. Jim, you have May 2nd, 1788, because I gave you May 1788 from my research, and I gave you Salmon, Idaho, what's now Salmon, Idaho. She too has a trickster with her name, Sacagawea or Sacagawea or Saksa-Mea. I know I tried to say it in Shoshone, means boat puller. She was the one that led the boat launcher. She also, it was pronounced in another way, in the Shoshone way, Tsaka-Wea, together, meaning bird, woman. And she was actually essentially married off in her teens as a slave herself. Very little is known about the early life, but she came from the Shoshone, which means Lemhi Shoshone means salmon eater. They're the people of what we call Salmon, Idaho. In 1800, when she was about 12 years old, Sacagawea and several other children were taken captive by a Hidatsa raid and the deaths of several Shoshone, but she was held captive. And at about age 13, she was sold into a non-consensual marriage with a Frenchman, Toussaint Charbonneau, a Quebecois trapper who had also bought another Shoshone girl. So that this is the time you could buy a woman known as Otter Woman for a wife. And so he purchased both the girls, but she was good at languages, and she was able to be hired under Toussaint Charbonneau as a speaking native languages. And at the time in 1804, when this deal was sealed, she was pregnant with the first child at the time and led this expedition. That was me trying to wrap it up very quickly. Was that good, Jim?
Yes, that's very good. I'm going to back up a second here quick. And point something out. Okay. Sojourner Truth. We have this yod, we have the finger of God, North Node, Jupiter pointing to Neptune, Mars. With Harriet Tubman, we have a mystic rectangle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
With Sacagawea, we have two kites.
Mhm.
And a mystic rectangle.
So there's a whole, and the mystic rectangle. So all of them have these very powerful aspect patterns within their charts. All of them have that show drive, determination. They're not going to lay down and die. They're not going to simply acquiesce and sit there and bow their heads and be the humble, keep the fire burning, cook, and get in my bed when I'm ready for you, kind of thing. And with Charbonneau, the French trappers were the ones that really made first contact with many of the tribes in the upper plains and in the mountains, because they kept moving west and looking for better fur sources. And so, yeah, it would make sense that they would then marry or buy wives from the various tribes, because that way it gives them an in with the tribe. They gain knowledge and they gain a contact.
Mhm.
And they gain an expert linguist.
Yes.
And I'm not sure how you came up with this date, but I know we know it's May. So we know Saturn is coming to approach Sedna.
Okay.
And this, we know in this history, that's fascinating.
Mhm.
How did you, yeah, Mercury would be in Aries anytime, probably around this time.
Yeah.
How did you
Yeah.
come up
But
with the second?
I think it was, I was thinking, oh, it's like, what is it? It's the
Taurus?
holiday, the May 2nd holiday. What's it called? Is that called Beltane?
Beltane, May 1st, yeah.
May 1st, May 2nd. Yeah, I think that's
Full moon
what I came up with.
or, oh, coming to, oh no, it would be coming to a new moon. Oh, I see. Either way, again, we'd have to look at those long, the planets that would be there that month and the long transiting planets. And then, of course, if we looked at her life, all of these events in her, what may be a short life, there are two different stories about whether she lived to age 24 or snuck out of the tribe and headed elsewhere back to her people and escaped. But either way, she'll have a black moon Lilith in Capricorn coming to conjunct Eris in Capricorn, which is very telling. And with Sedna right on that north node in Sagittarius, these are very adventurous.
That's Haumea.
Oh, Haumea, sorry. Oh, Haumea. It's
How may I help you? Bad pun.
wow.
Okay. Yeah.
It's okay.
Sorry, I got those scrambled.
Okay, that's good. Okay, here you go. Olympe de Gouges.
Olympe de Gouges.
De Gouges?
Olympe de Gouges, May 7th,
Olympe de Gouges.
1748. Who, if you haven't heard of a woman, that means a historical woman, that means her life has been covered up. So I wanted to include indigenous women like Sacagawea and Olympe de Gouges, who's French. We have so who is she? She's born in 1748 in the south of France. She is a fascinating woman. She finds herself as a playwright. I think she's an illegitimate child, but has some education, and she becomes an author and a playwright and a social activist at this time. Where could we see that in the chart? Well, let's see. Where is Uranus and where is, oh,
And Uranus over here in the sixth house, 17 Aquarius,
right.
conjunct
So
Jupiter.
So Saturn, I would say Saturn coming to square Uranus, Pluto, oh, Uranus coming to eventually square Pluto. This Uranus-Pluto cycle is active at this time period, 1740s, 50s, 60s. And so what happens? She moves to Paris in the middle of, and the lead up to the French Revolution. So in the, yeah, so she's an author, and in 1791, so 1789 starts the French Revolution, but it has a long buildup. So we can think about this life as having this buildup. And I have her execution date too. I don't know if you have a chart for that, Jim, but she's interesting. No. She moves to Paris, the Declaration of the Rights of Man. So 1776, the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths, you know, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, make this Declaration of Independence against Britain. In 1791, the Declaration of the Rights of Man is written, I believe. Check my math, but that's off the top. And this is also in parallel to the United States Declaration, but it includes only men. Notice both declarations include only men. So in response, Olympe de Gouges, who's also has another, this is also her pen name. She's Marie de Gouges, is born. And so she, Olympe, again, this heroic, mythic new name occurs, and a pen name, but she writes the Declaration of the Rights of Women. And it is word for word, verbatim, the rights of man, but and adds that women should have liberty, women should have divorce, women should have inheritance. And because it is the midst of the reign of terror, she's speaking against Robespierre. And do you know where this lands her? That's right, at the guillotine. So by 1793, I think it's November 3rd, 1793, that's in conjunction with the solar birthday chart of Marie Antoinette, Queen of France. She is executed at 7 p.m. So we have an actual death date and an execution date for her. But this is, why do I bring her up? She's a woman that's not American. I wanted to bring in other resources. And I also wanted to bring in what happens to women as they push forward, whether it's Sojourner Truth. You know, she's not treated well. Harriet Tubman is, you know, rides a train even after the Civil War, and she's horribly abused because she's Black. She's horribly injured again. These kinds of things happen to women that are speaking out against these systems. So it's absolutely essential that we speak upon these people and their work, and remember how difficult it has been for women across time to step forward to gain access to voting and inheritance and safety and choice over their own bodies. And she's definitely fueled the work of so many feminists after her. And I would certainly include, you know, Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote The Second Sex, and many feminists after her.
I'd like to add the Hammurabi Code that came up, you know, way during Chaldean and Babylonian times. He gave a lot of rights to women. They could own property, inherit their husband's stuff. I thought that was quite advanced. I don't know what happened to it after he lost his power because his son was a flop. But it's very interesting, I think, to realize that there were people, there were men even that tried to give women good rights in a time of the patriarchy building up. Just tossing that out.
I'm tossing out one about the Iroquois nation because they gave rights to women. In fact, Benjamin Franklin and George Washington used a lot of their ideas of how they set up their government. They had a tri-government too. They had 3 branches. The women picked the guys to go to the council and told them exactly what they were to do, and they could take them out if they wanted to. And so they had tremendous power, which is interesting because this was at the time of the revolution and when women had no rights, but here, here the women with these savages had, rights for women.
What was that tribe again?
Iroquois.
The Iroquois Nation, that's where I grew up in upstate New York, where it was there were 5 tribes, and then later on they took on another tribe. So we got to go to all these Indian places and learn the history about the Iroquois Nation.
Mm,
And they had a great government that Washington and Franklin went to study, and they were given a recognition 100 years later. 100 years later, Congress put out some kind of legislation recognizing their contribution to our form of government.
I've always heard the Cherokee or another group who had a lot of very sophisticated rights for women, and in fact, they were very well developed. And then along came a good old Jackson. I have friends who have history of being involved with indigenous people, and some of them will not even try to use a $20 bill. That's how, of course, Jackson started the great March of
Yes.
Death.
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted,
And then all those people went to Oklahoma, and if you've seen the killing of Flower Moon, they showed it was a terrible, terrible thing to see, how people were killing women, and because they inherited the right. They'd shoot the husband, and they'd shoot the women or make them sick so they could get the land, because the land was given to the Indians, and then they managed to tie it up to the land and ownership, and the women would get the rights if the man died, and then the woman would suddenly die, and it was a very disturbing movie, and she deserves
yeah, I wanted to see them. I have a question. I should know this answer, but I don't know the answer. So I'm giving a tour in Pasadena. I'm talking about these houses there that are from the early 1900s. And as I go around the neighborhood, I realized, and I tell the people on my tour, the difference between the women who had these houses in Pasadena is that they could own property and they could inherit money. And I compare it to the Edwardian women, which is about the same time. That's why we have Downton Abbey, because the British women couldn't inherit the money or the estates. So that's why they would marry American women and bring them over there. That's the whole point of Downton Abbey, is that thing. So when did American women, have the right? Did we always have the right to own property and inherit money, like the Vanderbilts women and all those women? Does anybody know that? Did we always have that right? Or did we get it at a certain time? I know we didn't get the vote until 1919 or something, but what about the money part, the property part? There's a lot of wealthy women when you think about, the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and all of that, and these women could have the money.
real briefly, just to answer that question, Rita, 1920 and 22 were U.S. women's voting rights
Yeah.
And state by state, the laws for inheritance have been different. And it wasn't really until the 1970s that a woman could take out a loan or buy a house.
Yeah, that's different. I'm talking about these
Yeah.
back in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, which is the time period that I'm showing these houses.
Right.
These
I
women
wanted, we'd have to do our
they had their own.
research.
The one was the Salt Queen of Utah, and she had her own money. One was a Chicago novelist, so they must have been able to inherit money and keep money. I don't know. It's just I can look it up later.
That's a whole nother research project.
Okay.
Hey, I just wanted to bounce back to the chart of what we're talking about with Olympe de Gouges, just real briefly to talk about those aspects. So before we forget her story, she's the woman that wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Women and was executed because of it.
Yeah.
At the Reign of Terror, which, bounce back to the topic. And just real briefly, looking at these aspects, if you, you could know her life and then start to draw the chart by yourself, you would know that Eris and Sedna and Haumea and Pluto and Saturn and Mars are all going to be activated, which they are in this chart. Mars is coming to oppose Eris. Mars is the warrior god that rules, initiation, but opposing Eris, coming to oppose Eris, his sister, but also she's the one that overturns the apple cart, and she is out, becomes the outsider because of it, very briefly. Let's see, other aspects that I wanted to connect to. Notice what's the partile conjunction to Saturn in Virgo? Can you see that? Is that Haumea?
That is Omea.
Yes. Okay. So Saturn conjuncting Haumea. Saturn, ruling the patriarchy, the fathers, the structures of time and hierarchy, rules in Virgo, in the sign of an empowered woman. That is very, very interesting. So we know that there's a story there. Let's see. The moon, and this day would have been coming to oppose Sedna, the moon, the people. So the moon is opposing that story of Sedna. Sedna, she's recaptured, traded off to a husband, or chooses a wild man, dog husband, because no one in her Inuit tribe is sufficient. There's two different variations. And Sedna is then recaptured by her father. And on the way back, the sea kicks up by the anger of the gods, or this strange birdman creature that has tried to possess her. And the father, instead of paddling away ferociously with courage, decides to push Sedna out of the boat into the freezing Arctic water, and cuts off her fingers and hits her in the head, leaves her for dead in the icy waters. So, my goodness, this is a story. So anytime we see Sedna, we see the patriarchy not having courage, and not just abandoning, but massacring his own daughter. So we'll see this. So literally, she's executed.
Who are you talking about, Katrina?
Sedna.
And Olympe de Gouges. She's
Oh.
she's killed by the blade. It's a direct. She's executed by guillotine. So it's a direct correlation to this. And if we put in other harmonics, we might see Sedna having aspects elsewhere. Those are the biggies. Just to make it a quick chart visit.
Yeah, and we have the sun at the bendings of the nodes. The T-square from the nodes to the sun makes a T-square with the nodes.
Tell us what that means.
It's at the bendings, which is where moon wobble occurs, chaos reigns supreme. More extreme events may occur, be they natural or man-made, disasters and the like.
Yeah. So
now, in answer to Rita's question.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good. Oh, and just to say briefly, we could also think about that as sun squaring the nodes. Sun,
yes,
in difficult. I think about the square real briefly as it's a stop sign. It's a hard right angle. You cannot go back. You must go forward, right, or left. There's a decision point that needs to be made. And so she's making it here.
Yes. So when the United States was formed initially, they were under common law, under British common law, basically. And that's been the case. We've adhered to that throughout our history. But over several decades, beginning in 1839, statutes that enabled women to control real and personal property, enter into contracts and lawsuits, inherit independently of their husbands, work for salary, and write wills were enacted. So it wasn't a simple one and done thing for the country. States started it. The first state was Mississippi.
I'm sorry, what did I just miss? About rights?
This is
The answer to your
the right to
question.
inherit.
Oh,
The right
no,
of
tell me,
women's
tell
right
me.
to inherit and own property.
I'm sorry, I went to get tea for my voice. What were the rights you were just, I'm sorry, what did you just say, Jim?
The right for women to inherit property,
Yes, thank you.
to own and inherit property. Okay. The question you were asking about.
Yes.
All right. So the first state to enact such a legislation was Mississippi in 1839.
Okay.
The first such, which was granted married women the right to own but not control property in her own name. It was enacted after a successful case by a Chickasaw woman Betty Love Allen, prevented a creditor of her husband from seizing her separately owned slaves.
Interesting. Okay.
Maine
The
and
property
Maryland
of-
did like, yeah, so Maine and Maryland enacted legislation in 1840, New Hampshire in 42, allowing married women to own and manage property in their own name during the incapacity of their husband. Kentucky did the same in 1843. 1844, Maine extended married women property rights by granting them separate economy and then trade licenses.
Mm.
Massachusetts also granted married women separate economy in 1844. So the whole thing was a slow process.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have
Is
New
it-
York in there? Do you have like New York in there?
Yeah. Now, however, as late as 1867, a decision of the Supreme Court of Illinois in Colby Van Ripper noted that it is simply impossible that a married woman should be able to control and enjoy her property as if she were sole without practically leaving her at liberty to annul the marriage. So even then, there was like, what? A woman with these rights? Get serious. I mean, for one thing,
Well, I have to
yeah,
mention Rhode Island very early on gave women the vote.
mhm,
But then
um,
once they became the United States, they took it away.
mhm,
They took
yes.
everything away.
And then Wyoming, I think, was the first one to give them the right to vote after that,
Huh.
like in the 1870s or something,
Yeah, all that history so
even before
fascinating.
Wyoming was a state,
Hmm.
if I recall. So, yeah, it's it's an interesting history of progress and moving forward, retreating, moving forward,
Mhm,
going back.
mhm,
Well,
mhm.
we're in a stage
The
of
old,
going back right now.
mhm.
Well, yeah.
Yes, well, that's because of these, and unfortunately, it's no longer just the old white guys. Now they got some young white guys that want to do this too, and on top of that, some women. I mean, it's like women. Mhm.
Can I
Yeah,
ask you, Cornelia, when you were in Rhode Island, I went to a school in Rhode Island, and I think if I remember, that Roger Williams was the head,
Yes.
and he was very liberal. He not only
Right.
helped women and set that up, he also had a good relationship with the Jews. And when you go in Rhode Island to the temple, they had a temple in Providence that
Mhm,
all the other temples had an escape tunnel, but in this particular temple or shul, they dug just a little bit of the temple, and they just pointed out that they felt corporate enough that they didn't have to build an escape tunnel. So I thought I just tossed that out because I was in
They felt what? I didn't hear that. They felt what?
a escape tunnel.
Yeah, they did or they didn't.
They
but
did. But
they
there was one time after he was so good to the Jews that they said, "Look at this! He loves us so much. We're not going to dig an escape tunnel with this particular temple."
yeah, they felt
Well,
secure enough.
Roger Williams left
Mhm.
Massachusetts because of religious persecution. So
Yes.
that's why he started Providence, Rhode Island, because I used to go to
That's
school
right.
in Rhode Island, so I know some history about it. Yeah, that's what I was talking about, these underground railroads, the underground tunnels. And I actually have a client whose ancestor had a Jewish temple in Rhode Island. Yeah.
Rhode Island was also the place where people from the Puritans who were kicked out of town, that's where
Yeah,
they went.
that's where they went. Yeah, that's why Roger Williams,
Right.
Roger.
If you're not pure enough, you go to Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Okay. Spencer, are you still there?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Your turn.
Uh,
Edith Wilson.
oh, Edith Wilson. This is a very interesting story because Woodrow Wilson was her second husband. She was married before and had a child with this guy who I've written down here, but can't read my writing right now. And anyway, he died. And so then through a cousin, Wilson and few were brought together, and then he had a stroke and was very incapacitated, and she managed to be and develop quite amount of power because she became his spokesperson, and
Mhm.
he was strong enough to get the this guy. I can't remember. She used a stewardship. She's got the Secretary of State canned, and became a woman who could actually determine what things went to Congress to actually be voted on, and she did a very good job. And oddly enough, she lived a long time. She didn't die until I think 61 or something. I don't know. She must have been forever. But I think she's born in 18. What's the birth year? 1872. So yeah, she could make it to 61. And she lived long enough to be at Franklin Roosevelt's funeral, and became friends with our next topic. Actually, is my favorite First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. So
Mine
the
too.
thing I think is interesting is these two women both became very powerful and held the Union together, or held the steadiness of the process. We never signed the treaty that ends the First World War somehow, and then we never signed the League of Nations, and that was Woodrow Wilson's big thing, his 12
Right.
points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the English, I mean, the French tortured him. He says, well, God only gave us 10 commandments, but Wilson has to have 12. And they kept picking him apart like that. And she defended him and was
Oh,
quite.
she was totally angry. She said it was their fault he had a stroke because
Ah,
he was on a train trip going around trying to promote it, the League of Nations.
Right.
I did not know that was the reason he got the stroke. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. He has a stroke. And so Edith has to take over. And Eleanor, we're going to get to,
Had to take over. Yeah.
because of the paralysis that he got. You know who I'm talking about. Not
Polio.
Teddy, but
Yeah.
Franklin. Franklin had the paralysis. So Eleanor was like his eyes and ears and his legs. Interesting that these two wives.
Right.
Now, again, we look at the chart and we see several significant aspect patterns. We have another kite with the Jupiter, black moon, Sun, Mercury opposing Neptune, and Athena over here at the other corner of the kite. And it's interesting because Neptune is the tail of the kite, and it's the tail that controls the flight of the kite. Without a good tail, the kite won't fly well.
Yes,
Right.
and I like to point out that Athena is my favorite goddess and my favorite asteroid. I think that she is so responsible in many of the charts that I do, that she works the best. Others don't seem to have the same consistency. Just for me, I know other people have success with the other ones, but she's my favorite, so I have to toss that in.
And then there's a second kite here with the nodes for the opposition, Uranus, and then looks like Moon Chiron.
Yes.
And then there's also then a grand trine from Athena to Jupiter to Neptune back to Athena.
Right.
And so there's a tremendous amount of energy within these charts that give these women that help signify or reflect the power that and influence that these women have coming from the power of this chart.
Can I ask of people that work with Ceres, there is a very strong 7 to 6 Earth trine between Mars and Ceres. And I remember what was done the last time talking about her is involved with nourishment. Does anyone work with her a lot and have something to say about her?
I am talking about her involved with nourishment to the J. Spencer Grendel list.
Oh God,
Let
you
me
know
know
that
or
that
location.
that set off my series. on my phone.
She answered you. Spencer, you got your answer.
Yeah,
But we also have Mars squaring the nodes.
yes.
Hmm.
Nice tight aspect there. So yeah. No, I don't, ladies, any of you work with Ceres very much? No. All right, let's look at
I'm
Eleanor.
looking it up.
I
I'm
don't-
looking it up.
think
I'll be right
Andrea
with
does.
you.
I'd
Okay.
like to ask how, the only one I've studied even closely is Chiron, and I'm still struggling with that before I get into all these. I haven't gotten into all these other ones yet. It seems to me like there's a lot going on there, but I just haven't studied them.
Oh, I
Have you
have the
read the-
answer for Spencer. Can I say real quick?
Yeah.
This is from the Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets by Barbara G. Walker. So very briefly, Ceres is the Latin form of the great goddess,
Demetrius.
cognate with the Greek Kore or Kora,
Mhm.
identified with Demeter as Mother Earth, as the earth ruling aspect of the goddesses' trinity.
Mhm.
Goddesses' trinity. Ceres combined with Juno as queen of heaven and Proserpina as queen of the underworld. And she was called Ceres Legifera, Ceres the lawgiver, the lawgiver. That's really interesting.
Hmm.
Her priestesses, remember, we have temples and priestesses for all of these rulers, were considered the founders of the Roman legal system. Ceres ruled Rome through her sacred matronae during that lost period of 4 centuries before 200 BC, a period whose written records were destroyed by later patriarchal historians, leaving only the residue of myths and religious customs that were only vaguely explained. Yet farmers viewed her as the source of all food and kept her rights faithfully for the fear of crop failure.
Mhm.
This was not only true of Roman farmers, but even Christian farmers. Ceres' greatest annual festival, Cerealia, like where we get the word cereal, was celebrated in the British Isles almost to the present day, and an account of the Shrine of Murray in the late 19th century said, in the middle of June, farmers go round their corn with burning torches in memory of the Cerealia.
Huh.
Na na na.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Thank you, Katerina. All right,
One
keeping the
more
flow
thing
going.
about Chiron, I want to I've just finished reading this book by our favorite Liz Green, and she really has lit a fire up about Chiron. Has anyone else read that book yet?
No, I didn't know she had one on Chiron.
Yeah, she does. And she thinks that Chiron can be very angry at times, and withdrawing into his cave was because he was brooding and feeling bad for himself, and his mother rejecting him, and all of these problems give him a certain resentment, which, it's kind of a
Well, let me put it this way. In my new chart, we've had Uranus sitting on Chiron in the 12th house. Does that explain the chaos that's been going on?
yeah.
All the issues, the old issues are coming up, like women's rights,
Right.
etc. We've got to
Yep.
heal those wounds. Oh, this is my lady. I loved her.
I do
I
too.
grew up all during that Roosevelt period of time. I mean, he was my man. We listened to his fireside chats. We believed everything he said. It was just
Again, Ken Burns, PBS, 16 hours of the Roosevelt, starting with Teddy going all the way through Eleanor's death, which is like almost a big chunk of American history.
yeah.
Oh, Angie, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just on the topic of series, I recommend the book Asteroid Goddesses by I think it's Demetra George. She's one of the foremost astrological writers living
Okay,
today.
what's her name?
Demetra George, we can barely hear you, Angie.
Oh,
Can you
I
come
know
closer
her.
to
I
your
know her.
microphone?
You can barely.
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can.
Come closer to your microphone. We have an echo. It's Demetra George, the asteroid goddesses.
Yeah, can you hear me better? Yeah. The book
Yes.
Asteroid Goddesses, because she covers super in depth. She's like very much a classicist in terms of astrology, traditional astrology, but she does heavy research into. She's been on I think the astrology podcast with Chris Brennan, but Ceres, Pallas Athene, Vesta, and Juno. So it's, if you want to get like pretty much the lowdown on these goddesses, that is the one to go to. And Ceres is, I think, like possibly people say like the actual or maybe a subsidiary ruler of Virgo. Very much, probably the head of all those asteroid goddesses, because she's literally like the great mother, the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So because you have this.
What's the name of the book?
Asteroid, let me find it here one second.
Asteroid Goddesses.
Yeah, Asteroid Goddesses by Demetra George and Douglas Block. So this one is actually like a classic and has been in print a long time.
Demetra George is big in the AFA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this one is like, actually like, it was a really wildly popular book. So I would recommend that one for like the definitive, I would say the definitive insight on the 4 major asteroid. And actually they're very significant because a lot of planets, women were basically just assigned to like Moon and Venus.
Right.
I actually think Neptune should be female, but anyways. So due to that, in modern times, we relegated more of the goddesses to those, I mean, the female energy to those goddesses. So they're very significant.
It's interesting because the old sailors used Neptune as, they always talked about the sea as being a woman.
Yeah. So it doesn't make sense. And actually Neptune is like the higher octave of Venus, just like Pluto for Mars, Uranus for Mercury. So it doesn't really make sense. But actually, so it's like nowadays, the gender of the planets, I mean, the names, how we assign like these gods or goddesses to it doesn't matter, because a lot of women are their sun. A lot of men have yet to embrace their moon completely. So everything's shifting in terms of the signs of the planets and the energies.
And I'm very much drawing on the work of Demetra George in bringing in this research, and she has actually expanded. That was work that she did in the 70s and 80s women's movement, and I'm drawing on her work too in my own work, research of Sedna and Eris and Haumea.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the women's feminist history, astrological feminist history language that we're drawing from.
Yeah,
she was the one that she printed all the research, and every year they put out a journal of research, and she's the one that took my article when I was doing Kid Wheels. So that was in their research journal. She said it was one of the finest pieces of research she'd seen.
Yeah,
I guess it was at that time. Yeah, that came from her, and I thought that was really nice.
Well, I can back that up. I used her advice recently on a difficult child. But the thing I want to say is I think that we're in a very different world if we can get through this, because there are more women in college now, I was told, than men. And I think that that's a good sign, because I do think that people that have babies are not hot on killing things, I think
Right. No, they're not. That's what's been missing for all those years.
Yeah.
There were a few terrorist women, but not as many as men. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cornelia, did you say that you were raised in New York? Were you the one that
Yes.
said you were raised in New York? So
Yeah,
you're
upstate New
probably-
York, Syracuse.
Right. You probably, and I'm raised on Long Island, so we're probably very familiar with more Roosevelt stuff because they're local. Like, when you go to the home of Teddy Roosevelt on Sagamore Hill and you go up
I
see
went to
what-
Roosevelt's home and back and I bought a little image of Fala, his dog,
Ah,
which I still
yeah,
have.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. So here's Eleanor Roosevelt's chart. You go, Spencer.
Well, she's got a bull, okay? If you look at it,
Mhm.
it's all done in opposition. So this, to me, I think a bull is very focused, and she's got. If you look at the top of the chart, you see we have Jupiter on one end of this great number of planets to
Mhm.
18 degrees of Libra. On the other side of this, and you see how powerful that is, and yet she does have these planets that in one way you'd think, well, I really would like it because these planets, but none of them really, to me, unless you go to uh, eight, I guess it would be 6 degrees actually to get a Saturn Sun trine. Now I was raised by Marion March, and she always gave 7 degrees, and I don't know if other people do that, but you can see that it's incredibly strong that all of these things are contained like this and has so much focus. And then when you go through the wheel of the chart and you start realizing that this focus controls the whole thing, there's so many sharing of different things. And of course, she's got this moon exalted in Cancer and trining Mars. So this woman was really, really a strong woman. And if I can be bold, she was kind of always suspected to be gay because they had this one guy in they called her mate or partner,
Right.
the cowboy, and they would suddenly decide they had to go and check out the diplomatic relationships in the Caribbean. So, but I think that she has this really, really powerful chart. If you give her the trine Saturn Sun, then that's a very, very powerful chart with that two different trines working together, both in towards of the aspect of the eighth house. To me, one of the ways I look at the eighth house is the evolutionary power, a part of the self. That as you work through with all, oh my God, let me turn this thing off. Here.
Now I've lost something. Have other people lost something?
Yeah, Jim,
Yeah.
we're losing the screen when you're dabbling in your software.
Oh
Huh?
no,
We
it's
have-
my cell phone. My cell phone seemed to go off again. So anyway, and if you let me look at my own chart here. I'm probably babbling because I'm looking at my own stuff here, but you can also see that her Neptune trines Uranus, and even though this is a generational thing, it still shows that her generational thing, and we seem to have, everyone says it's 11 o'clock. Does everyone else have 11? Jimmy, is it 11 o'clock you have on your?
Yes, 11 a.m.
Okay, so then we have all of this other stuff going on, and yet we have this powerful a situation going on with Uranus and Neptune, and this happens to be in the 5th and 9th houses. And of course, the 9th house for me, it has a whole lot of different powers. As an ex-Peace Corps volunteer, I also think that part of the education of the 9th house is also intercultural differences. We also look at it for law, and religion, writing skills or research skills like so many women in this group have. So I think she was really powerful. Also, she has the point of Aries is in her 3rd house. And it's right there with the Mercury. So there's this thing going on about how well communicator she was. And I also think we're back to that moon again. She has been so helpful in establishing different ways of taking care of kids and women that she just really had her expansion of. I love this one. She's my favorite
Mhm.
first lady. Of course, I'm sure there are others that would not agree with that, but she's the one I always look to. And the other thing that we want to kind of take a peek at, although it's wide, is she does have Chiron in the sixth. And, you know, she had to put up with a lot of stuff of different powers. And I think Franklin's mother was a little
Yes.
critical of her. So she
Oh.
and then like the other final thing I want to talk about here is that Saturn in the seventh shows what a strength he has in terms of forming partnerships, having good relationships with people who we have real values used. And once again, though it's in Gemini, the seventh is ruled by that moon. So this woman comes action packed in a whole rainbow of different kinds of skills that to me made her just stand out. Like I say, she's my favorite first lady. Do you guys want to talk about that now?
Yeah, I'd like to say something about, you have to remember that the third house is ruled by Aquarius, and she has Uranus conjunct Mercury up there. You know, she went to a very special school in Switzerland
No,
where she had a mentor who was totally radical. That's where she got all of her radical ideas.
that's a good thing to point out.
Now, where are you pointing that out? In the
In
third
the,
house?
in the ninth house.
Oh, the ninth house. Yeah, because
No, I'm talking about the Uranus conjunct Mercury. Uranus rules the third house.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
And she went to a school in Switzerland. Well, her mother sent her away because she called her the ugly duckling.
Yeah.
That's
I heard
another
that.
thing about.
actually, it was worse than that. Her
Yeah,
mother
it was
ca-
worse than that.
Her mother called her mushroom face,
Yes,
and it was her uncle Teddy who really liked her.
right.
He then asked his sister to help her, and it was the sister that got her into this private school. And at the school, they said, "You're so talented and you have so much connections. You're meant to do something."
Hmm.
So she was kind of saved by the
Well,
It's amazing what good teachers can do.
yeah, yeah. Plus, she did have Teddy on her side. I'm
Hmm.
sure he wasn't. Yeah, he's pretty strong. Yeah. So it's
No.
kind of interesting.
Hmm.
But everything's in the upper half, right? Almost everything's in the upper half.
did Franklin or was it Teddy had a mother that bought the house next to theirs, the townhouse, and they had the door that go between the mother-in-law and the mother.
Yeah, well, that's one of the mother controlled Franklin. She didn't want Eleanor to control him. She wanted to control him.
Yeah. Yeah.
She didn't want him to run for president. After he
Mhm.
had polio, she didn't want him to run.
Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting.
for those of you who don't watch Curse of Oak Island, Franklin, prior to contracting polio, apparently was part of a group of investors that were digging for treasure on Oak Island.
Really?
What
Yes.
island?
It's called Oak Island. It's off the coast of, I think it's New Brunswick.
Oh,
It's up in Canadian waters. And
oh,
supposedly there's a mystery, a great mystery there, where apparently it appears that some treasure was buried there. Some, let's see where we at, 200 to, I think that's 250 years or more ago. And so it's a long running series on what is it, History Channel, I think it is.
oh,
The Curse of Oak Island. These two brothers have been obsessed with it since an article appeared in Reader's Digest back in the early 60s about it.
Hmm.
And prior to them, there were, like I say, prior to them, there were other people that had been digging for the treasure, and prior to them was Roosevelt and some of his people. And prior to that, there were other groups that have been digging for this treasure. But if I remember right, Franklin and Eleanor were cousins, were they not?
Yes.
They but a distance enough that they could marry. But yes, they were cousins. Interesting. The whole Roosevelt family on both sides is so interesting.
Mhm.
hmm
Yeah, so the a couple of things I want to mention here. One, we have, if you haven't mentioned, notice is the Venus Athena close conjunction, partile conjunction in Virgo.
Yes.
hmm
But the other thing that's quite interesting, I think, is that she was born a week after a total lunar eclipse and 8 days before a solar eclipse.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So she's born between two eclipses. And that may be part of her fascinating power, perhaps.
Well, she had, despite what they say about her appearance, and she's not very photogenic, that Venus trining Pluto, I still admit that she gave off, and this is a woman that you have to listen to her because she just comes on with such kind of a charismatic aspect,
Mhm.
and she just stands strong. She with Pluto in her sixth house and ruled by this Venus, it brings another aspect of
Well,
all.
you know what? If something hadn't happened to Franklin, she wouldn't have become as powerful as she did.
Probably not.
No,
Probably
because
not.
she was really rather shy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Excuse me. Any last thoughts on Eleanor? All right, moving along.
Okay.
Next up. Oh, Wilma Mankiller. Uh,
What a name.
yeah, well, yeah. Cherokee. First female elected principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, which is one of the most populous indigenous tribes in America in terms of sheer numbers. Yeah, they were part of what was known as the Five Civilized Tribes, Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, and a couple others. I don't remember who the others were for sure. That had primarily been in the Carolinas, um, Eastern Tennessee, Alabama area for hundreds of years. And then when uh, somebody discovered a little bit of gold in the them thar hills, President Jackson decided, well, we can't have the Indians having this. We got to get them out of here. And
Yeah.
they had this empty space out in what is we know as Oklahoma. They had picked up from the Louisiana Purchase and said, all right, we're going to send them all there. And thus became the famous Trail of Tears.
Trail of tears, right?
Yeah, in which thousands of them died. Not all of them were rounded up and sent out. But I mean, at this point, they were living pretty much like white people. They lived in houses and they farmed, and yeah, they had acclimated to the European culture, but didn't matter. They weren't white. They weren't, like the rest of them. So they just packed them up and farmed them all. But like I say, a lot of them died along the way from disease, hardships, and the like. And they put them out in Oklahoma in what was then known as Indian Territory, because they figured, what the heck, we're never going to want that land. And that, of course, then changed later on when oil was discovered there.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, see, Oklahoma was the 46th state admitted to the Union, I believe. Um,
She's born
and
at the end of World War II. She's pretty recent.
it was admitted like in 1905, I think it
No, I
was.
meant the woman you're talking about.
Wilma Mankiller,
She's,
yes.
yeah, she's our age. Or she was
Yes,
our age.
she
I
was.
was
Yeah,
just,
she died 15 years ago, something like that.
she was born at the end of World War II. Wow.
Yeah. Mhm.
What
Yeah,
is
she's one of
her,
us. Um,
what is her, how is, tell me more about her.
okay, so she was she was involved in the Cherokee, like most Native American tribes. The women have always had more power, authority, influence than in European cultures. Um, with the indigenous tribes, the Plains tribes, for example, the ones we think of as riding on horses and dragging their teepees all over the place. The woman owned the teepee. She owned the home. And if she wanted to get rid of her husband, she simply threw his shit out the door and he was gone. Here you go. Go find someplace else to shack up.
Mhm.
She still had, she owned the teepee. It was hers. She made it. It was hers. But she was the first woman that was elected the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, and she held that position for about 10 years, I believe, 10 to 15 years. So very influential within that indigenous culture.
Mhm.
A couple of things that jump up. We have Athena conjunct the Sun in Scorpio. We have Jupiter conjunct Chiron in Libra. We have a Uranus Mercury opposition. Let's see.
Well, now is that trine? I have, is that a trine or what is going on with the Saturn? I think that's in
Here,
Cancer. Yeah, so
Saturn
look
at
at that.
24 Cancer.
Yeah, look at what it
Yes,
does with the moon, with the sun.
right. It's trining Athena and the Sun.
Right. And I have to tell another personal story here. When I was at Harvard, I met a woman who I had a couple of years with, and her father was a Cherokee guy, and she was half Cherokee. And when I was taken home to meet the dad, he was brilliant. I mean, this guy, and we went driving around, him and I, in his car. He wanted to get to know me better, and so he started talking about the way he was treated when he was little. And this is a guy that was the vice president of a large corporation that only dealt with other corporations. It was chemicals. And the only thing they ever had that was retail was Pittsburgh Paints. But he told me about how they always thought he was dumb and that they never thought he could do anything. But he actually got an engineering degree and made a ton of money. And yet when he talked about it, you could still just feel a deep pain and resentment that really overwhelmed me. I didn't realize how actually meeting someone who had been through this part of growing up and had made money, and how much anger he still I don't know why I was surprised actually, but I did feel it. And this whole situation with Uranus Jupiter wanting to show his own creativity and change things is certainly an aspect of this man.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, the Mercury Uranus Jupiter, that's a minor learning triangle, is it not, Spencer?
what's that? Oh yeah, a learning trine. That's true.
Yeah. And
That's
the Huber's learning triangle. Yeah.
yeah. So this was quite a situation, and I was, I took a very real interest in the Cherokee after that, and if you look at Chiron there conjunct at Jupiter and the ninth, there's certainly a pain over the concept of all these different things in the ninth house, and Jupiter's this huge expansion of energy and insight that's in one way been involved with the pain of Chiron in that very aspect of education, which is one of the key things in the ninth. So I really learned a lot from that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Frida Kahlo, Mexican painter. Look at all that stuff in Cancer.
Jim, can I give a little background on Frida Kahlo?
Pure.
Yeah, so she is Kahlo is a German name. She's Mexican. What would you call it? German Mexican, like German American, German Mexican. I wanted to make sure we brought in people from other places in the world besides the US. And Frida Kahlo, known as a famous painter, she too had tremendous injuries and illnesses, which led her to be bedridden first, as a young girl, she had polio, which caused her
dear.
physical disabilities. As a teenager, she became very interested in medicine, and she was planning to go to medical school. She was very progressive, parallel to the communist movement, and became an active Marxist Leninist Marxist communist. But when she was, I believe, around 18, she was involved with a terrible metro or subway accident, rail accident, where there was a terrible crash, and they literally left her for dead because they thought she wouldn't survive the injury. And this forever caused her an injury to her uterus, her reproductive system. So instead of going forward, right, and so we could see this. My goodness, look at all of this cancer as I say the words reproductive system, and she could not become a mother. But in ways, she became the mother of the Mexican surrealist movement, the Mexican feminist movement, the Mexican Marxist communist movement. She decided then she survived somehow this accident. Let's look and see where Chiron is in her chart.
It's in the 6th house.
Oh yeah, 6th house. This is very interesting. Yeah, terrible wounds, and we'll see this throughout her life. You could see that in the relationship with Venus and Pluto. Very difficult.
Yeah.
And also and all these 3 signs in Gemini ruled by Mercury, the mind. I always want to bring back, what are the rulerships? So instead of becoming a medical student, she's terribly injured. She finds by hook or by crook the ability to go to art school, and she goes to school there. At this time in her young life, I'm bringing in this Gemini nature because she was also a cross-dresser. In the 19 teens and 20s, women's fashions changed radically, and there was a whole surrealist movement of feminism, writers and musicians and dancers and visual artists.
Oh,
They had
yeah.
this kind of,
Mhm.
and if you see her early, do the research and look at the early photographs and paintings of her, she's dressed in men's clothing as a man. Ironically, she takes the extremely subservient role as the much younger student than wife of Diego Rivera, who's a highly chauvinistic Mexican painting muralist, whose name we now, like for decades, we knew of him, and now he is relegated in time since Frida Kahlo has been the patron saint of Mexican American artists and politicos the world over. So very briefly, Sedna, Cancer at 8, where we could think about this whole stellium, but multiple midpoints that create these relationships between Sedna and oh no, that's Haumea rather.
Yeah,
Sedna
that's
is
Haumea.
Sedna is
But
in
it's
Aries.
squaring Haumea. Sedna squares Haumea.
Yes, it's
10 to
amazing.
8.
Right. So she becomes and from her numerous attempts at her spine was also broken, her uterus and reproductive sexual system was totally destroyed. So much of her paintings are surrealist, psychological. She's informed by young or early 20th century depth psychology, Jungian analysis. So if you look at her work, again, look at all this Pluto, Virgo, Lilith, and Gemini that ruled by the mind. And it's also a useful 2-bodied sign. She is a woman, she can't give birth. She is a woman, she dresses as a man. She has to undergo tremendous difficulties in her life, and dies quite young, in many, many surgeries and attempts to repairing her spine, repairing her reproductive system, the constant loss of her children through miscarriage, constantly trying to become the mother, but never being able to. So we could see this with this, Mars, Uranus, South Node opposing all of in Capricorn, patriarchy systems. Even her own husband, they live separately. They live in separate houses. He's known as a carouser. He rapes her sister and paints it in a painting of a mural that's publicly known to show his prowess, which is what is done in this era of visual art. So tremendous, tremendous difficulty.
Interesting. Did you know Georgia O'Keeffe? Did you ever it'd be interesting maybe to compare the two charts.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know work. Because I have my bachelor's and master's in fine arts, so I've taught art
Well, there
history.
you go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many to bring in. I wanted to make sure we brought in someone that was
Yes.
Mexican and
But when
indigenous.
we started, I knew who Frida was. I just didn't know the background of her, but I
Yeah,
do know the background a little bit more of Georgia O'Keeffe.
Yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of
Yeah.
Gemini, Mercury is on aspect.
Hmm.
It, unless you want to give it a trine to Sedna.
What's interesting about this is I also like to see, whenever I look at a chart, I'm always looking at the current transits too, Jim, because a chart lives on and on. She was,
Yes.
in the 20s, 30s, 40s, she wasn't really very known. She was actually encouraged, her work, through surrealism was supported by an American male curator that brought her work to New York City and exhibited it and started a career for her, which was really unusual. But she
Yeah.
was really also talking about that. You were talking about the Mercury unaspected, but the chart lives on and on. I'd be curious to see what this looks like
Mhm.
with transits, and also the moon as in Taurus exalted, and also the leader at the top of the chart, the highly exalted planet.
Could you increase your audio? I'm sorry, I'm listening, and I was just thinking your audio could be, I don't know.
I don't know that I
Increased
can.
because, yeah, trying to hear you a little better.
I'm going to say goodbye because I have another Zoom to go on to. Thank you so much.
Rita.
It was very, very interesting.
Thank you, Rita, for your
See-
great question.
Yeah.
See you. Welcome. Thank you for your research and all of you adding to it. Okay, so I'm going to go. Have a great month, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
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 Angie, I just put a headset with a microphone in. Is that audio any better?
I think so. I'm not hearing you as well as everyone else, and
Okay,
it's interesting listening. Thank you.
sure.
Okay. We're gonna keep moving, folks, because
Yes.
all right, Sandra Day O'Connor, first woman justice of the Supreme Court. We have good chart, good time, and this funky little symbol here, that's Astraea, the Greek goddess of justice. And she lived among them like so many gods at different times. They would live among the men, but most of the gods and goddesses would leave because mankind got really weird, cranky, and violent. So they were leaving, and she was the last to leave. She was the one sitting there with in one representation of the scales of justice. And because she was so convinced that mankind could be saved until she decided we couldn't. When she left, the gods placed her in the heavens as the constellation of Virgo and Libra, the scales held in her outstretched arm. So Astraea connects both to Virgo and to Libra. And for Sandra Day O'Connor, where is she? She's right there sitting on her cusp in the 12th house. Notice she's got a lot of Aries, Eris, Sun, Uranus, Sedna, Venus, Athena. Generally, Jupiter and Sagittarius are considered rulers of the law, the legal profession, lawyers. We see Sagittarius on the 12th house. We see Jupiter in the 6th, in Gemini. So Jupiter is in its fall, or debilitated. I'm not sure which one it would be, in Gemini.
The moon's unaspected. What do you think about that in Aquarius? If you have an unaspected moon and it's an Aquarius, those Aquarian moons are very inventive in terms of the way they use the concepts of self and individual versus the group. That there's a one in protection of the group, that a group has a way to function, but on the other hand, you also have to be very involved with the the concept of the self. And my mother had an Aquarius moon, and she was not really the touchy-feely kind of person, but when our debate team went to state, she drove us there. When I was playing flag football, she made sure I made it to every game. She just really was behind anything that I did with education. We had other problems, but if I was doing something for a project in education, she was hugs and kisses. But other things that I wanted to do that were more emotional, I had not exactly related to education, not so much support. But
Well, Spencer, the moon in Aquarius, a moon in traditional astrology, Saturn is the ruler of Aquarius. So we look at the relationship to Saturn and that's present. So we see that she's working the moon for the people in traditional astrology. And also, you're not maybe seeing an aspect if you're just using Ptolemaic aspects, but what if you're using quintiles or noniles or 11th harmonics? You may well find some very unusual, interesting aspects.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
you see the aspectarian there. I I want to say one more thing about that. I know it's ruled by Saturn, but I also have feelings that the concept of also working within groups of different kinds, I find to have been very helpful for me in terms of talking to clients. They come in all kinds of varieties, from crazy political parties to let's save the dogs, or they have the people I've dealt with in that situation. They would get involved with some kind of organization in which they felt an intellectual need to participate in that. And let me tell you, as an entertainer at parties, some of these women that were involved in these volunteer groups, these women were powerful, and some of them had, anyway, that's my,
Well,
I
you know what,
agree with
Spencer?
you.
Aquarius it means the water bearer. In traditional astrology, it's ruled by Saturn. Of course, they're powerful. And the water bearer is the working man and the working woman. It represents groups of people working together, laborers, unions. So
Yeah.
this makes sense.
And we think of Aquarius as being about causes and ideals.
I think of it in this case as the detachment that she needs as a judge,
Yeah.
And
Yeah, she has to
along
be.
with the Capricorn,
Well,
rising. Yeah.
does
Okay.
anybody
Yeah.
use, be me that uses Aquarius in the as a part of the symbolism, is the water berry comes through air, that the water comes from the rain, which nurtures the earth and brings about all the other kinds of growth. No one else works with it like that. I've
Yeah,
had,
Aquarius is kind of odd because it's fixed air, but we think of it as the water bearer. So it's like, okay, yeah, you have to make that kind of a connection, don't you? With
yeah,
what the rain that nurtures the earth.
yeah.
Okay, we got to keep going. Here we go. So here's Sonia Maria Sotomayor. Um,
Hmm.
don't have a birth time, so I use noon, but again, that just happens to place Estrella right there on her ascendant, but in Virgo. Virgo is the constellation that was created when Estrella was placed into the night sky, up into the sky. Um,
And what is
that's kind
that conjunct her moon?
where's I got oh, that's Sedna.
I don't know.
Hmm.
Opposing Neptune and Saturn.
Yeah,
Sedna moon
and
opposing
we have
Saturn.
a Cardinal Grand Cross.
For those of us that don't know, you want to say who Sonia Sotomayor is?
She was the first Hispanic woman appointed to the Supreme Court.
Thank you.
You've got a
And
nice Mars opposing the sun, which shows an incredible amount of emotionality and stuff when she was growing up. The concept between her own emotionality and wanting to expand in terms, even with the Jupiter, the concept of care and nurturing, the matriarch, or the woman that sees and serves in many ways and has all the interests of that. With the Mars in Capricorn, which to me, especially in the fourth house, I would think that there were a lot of problems, not only in her own family, dealing with some very judgmental person that kind of emotionally was disturbing, but also just the fact that she had to deal with all these judgments about her. Even getting her into the court was a battle of angry people and critical people with a lot of power. I really admire this woman. I think she earned what she got. And this is she happens to have a very strong Saturn trines her sun and Jupiter, so she didn't take it lying down. She just kept going and had this drive. And of course, it's in Scorpio, which this Scorpio cannot be underestimated. Biden came out with a stellium in Scorpio and suddenly came out like this phoenix the other night. And she kind of came out too, like for the Hispanic community. Before I came here, I was watching on Channel 7. They're doing a background of all the things about the Oscars, because they have the Oscars. And one of them, they had a very large discussion between a whole bunch of Latina people talking about how difficult it was to be a Latina, and to how but they have 26% of the voting group, and they have like 2% of the people. And so I'm sure she came up with a lot of prejudice too, and things like that. So that's kind of my, but also,
What's so really fascinating about her stellium in Cancer, it relates really to the chart of Frida Kahlo. And Sonia Sotomayor is this Mercury conjunct Uranus in Cancer, South Node, the history. In Latina culture, women are incredibly powerful. You take the names of your matrilineage, and she is really this kind of great mother force on that court. She's incredibly articulate, sharp-minded. So it makes total sense that we have that Mercury-Uranus conjunction. Mercury coming to conjunct.
An aspect of Venus as well. Interesting.
Yes. Isn't Mars exalted in Capricorn?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes, that's what I thought. In this case, she's born with Mars retrograde and way out of bounds south. So Mars doesn't have to behave the way Mars would typically behave. It may behave it may be more reserved or less extroverted, but it can behave in a more introverted, out of character manner.
But you also find that in athletes too. It's very disciplined, because athletes have to be very disciplined.
Yes. Mars retrograde often shows up in the charts of famous athletes or highly successful athletes. Okay, last of the ladies, Katanya Brown Jackson. And here she's got Virgo up the wazoo. Again, we have not only Estrella in Virgo, but it's conjunct Mars. It's partile conjunction to Haumea, Black Moon, Mercury, Sun, Pluto, and the South Node, all bunched together up there in Little Virgo. Well, actually, Virgo is the biggest of the constellations, so it's not Little Virgo. But yeah, and we have Athena conjunct the North Node in Pisces. Jupiter Venus conjunction over there in Scorpio. Again, we think of Virgo as it's the mutable Earth, but think of them as being analytical and critical, and all the qualities that a judge needs. They have to have an input. The ideal would be to have some degree of impersonality, because it's about what does the law say. It's not how you feel. What do you feel in terms as far as how you decide a case, but it's about what does the law say.
Mm-hmm.
And your feelings in terms of the outcome of a case are limited by what the law says or allows.
And not just the critical Virgo, but discerning. I mean, and remember, this is the
Mhm.
harvest main, and the woman, the person, the worker that discerns the wheat from the chaff.
And yes. Oh, and we also have Chiron as the point of the finger of God, the Yod.
Yes.
And Saturn on the descendant
Mhm.
part, approaching that house of marriage and partnerships, business partnerships. She has to partner with Saturn, authority, structured power in Taurus.
Yep.
On
Jumping along. Okay. So we're going to switch to eclipses now. So here's a list of some famous people that were born on an eclipse. We got Scarlett Johansson, Prince William, Ryan Reynolds, Sofia Vergara, Sean Austin, Rachel Weisz, Marissa Tomei, all born on solar eclipses. Kate Middleton, Jonah Hill, Donald Trump, John Benet Ramsey, Howie Mandel, Damon Wayans, all born on lunar eclipses. There's another guy that was born on a solar eclipse, in fact, born the same day as Prince William. I didn't include him, but how many of you remember Jussie Smollett,
No.
the actor?
Nope.
He was an actor who got
Yes.
a few years ago, claimed he was the subject of a racial hate attack and crime and made a big deal out of it. There's in Chicago, there's a big investigation. Turns out the whole thing was fake. He faked the whole thing. He hired the
Oh.
guys to attack him.
Yeah.
He was
Oh, I
trying to
remember
create
now. Yeah.
his he was trying to up his image because I think he was in contract negotiations for the series he was on. And it backfired because he contract was not renewed. But he and Prince William were born the same day, same eclipse, very different outcomes. Though in some ways, one could argue that Prince William's outcome hasn't been all that different, considering how um, the disruption that has come about within the royal family, particularly between him and his brother Harry. So,
Well, yeah, but the whole thing, his mother's death, all that kind of stuff with the now his wife is something. But the
yeah,
other thing, we don't know all the other things that were happening with that kid in Chicago was trying, you don't know what other things were affecting that kid because he hired people who were Igbos from Nigeria,
yes,
paid them,
yeah,
and they left. He bought them air tickets, and they bought air tickets back the next day so they could run. They didn't want to leave America. They just acted out the whole role with him so they could get the
yeah,
money.
yeah. It's interesting that Kate was born on a lunar eclipse in January, and then William was born on the subsequent solar eclipse in June.
That's
Um, uh,
amazing.
okay, so here's some historical eclipses. Um, one of the earliest solar eclipses recorded occurred in Mesopotamia, and the recording was found on one of the clay tablets. Near as they can tell, based upon the description, it was an eclipse of March 5th, 1223 BC. And they were able to identify it in part because the tablet talks about the visibility of the planet Mars during the eclipse. And also the historians who wrote it on the clay tablet recount how the sun was put to shame during the eclipse. Christian Gospel, i.e. Bible, talks about the darkening of the skies when Jesus was crucified. And there were two different eclipses that occurred in Jerusalem or visible in Jerusalem around the time that they think that he died. One was in 29 of Common Era, the other was in 33. 33 being the more likely one only because it was a longer one. Um, the Quran mentions an eclipse that preceded the birth of Muhammad. And this was later tied to a total eclipse in 569 of the Common Era. The sun also disappeared for a minute 40 seconds, so there was another solar eclipse when Muhammad's son Ibrahim died. But the world's first Muslims didn't believe that eclipses was a sign from God. Instead, according to Islamic texts, Muhammad proclaimed the, oh crap, it's got cut off. I have to fix that. Excuse me. Another interesting note. So in 1919, there was a very long eclipse, and physicists used that to validate Einstein's rule of general relativity, which was the warping of time and space, i.e., the bending of light by a round object.
Hmm.
So the 1919 eclipse served a scientific purpose. I'm rushing because it's getting late. Okay, Matt Turner. Long story short. Born into slavery October 2nd, 1800 in Virginia. There was an eclipse in 1831 that he saw. It was a total eclipse. The line was close to where he was living at the plantation he was on. And he saw the eclipse as a sign from God for him to lead a slave rebellion. August of that summer, he leads the slave rebellion. It only lasted a couple of days. Not a lot of people were killed. It wasn't a big rebellion. He got slaves from his plantation and some other neighboring plantations involved. Some 55 white men, women, and children were killed. The state militia, local troops quickly suppressed the uprising, and they estimate between 36 and 120 black women and men, women, and children, aka slaves, many of whom were not involved in the revolt, were killed by soldiers and then local mobs in retaliation. Turner was able to avoid capture for a couple of months, but was then captured, tried, and hanged on November 11th of 1831. Now, here is a chart for Nate Turner, born October 2nd, 1800. Why did I pick this date? The date is good. The time is based on the fact that it was a lunar eclipse. I took the time of the lunar eclipse on the date of his birth as his birth time. We see Mercury, Sun, South Node, Venus, all in Libra. We've got Moon, Athena, North Node in Aries. We've got Haumea in Capricorn, squaring the eclipse, Sun, Moon eclipse. Anybody else want to chime in anything here with Nate?
Yeah, this is an unusual character in history, real person. I brought him
Yeah.
up. We actually have his birthday as October 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
If we run this time, that's unusual. Sedna's in the first house approaching the ascendant. So he identifies with the indigenous people. And he is executed. Again, it ties directly in with the Sedna story.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was unusual. He was a smart man, and he was smart as a child, and he was educated, and he read the Bible, and he became very religious. So when the eclipse happened, he took that as a sign from God, and the rest, as I say, is kind of history.
Right. And he's executed what in 1830, 31?
31, yeah, November 11th, 1831.
Okay, so right after his Saturn return, and also because he is one of the earliest educated slaves in the 1830s, this is also the largest United States slave rebellion in American history. So this is really significant. Again, Mercury conjunct Uranus conjunct Sun. This is interesting. And also that this is the time that laws then change to prevent slaves from being educated. So it represents, even though there's a tremendous rebellion in relation to slavery, this is the 1830s are the time that slaves are no longer to be educated because of this. So as Jim, as you said early in conversation, the wheel turns, these cycles turn for issues about women and power. Their power rises and falls. These cycles turn, as does this chapter in African history, which we could tie to last month's topic too.
Here is the here's a chart showing or map showing the line of totality of that eclipse. And so Nat Turner was born and lived on a plantation down here in southeastern Virginia, not far from North Carolina. The eclipse was actually February 12th of 1831. Now, there was a subsequent eclipse in August, right before the rebellion, but that was not visible in the United States. So this was the one that did it for him.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll notice this first black line. This is the line showing that he had about 75% obstruction or occlusion of the sun. Here's 75% line going north. So the entire United States, anybody in the United States, if they had a clear sky, would have been able to see it, at least to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
This then is the actual chart of the eclipse. It was at 23 Aquarius 18. And the Sabian symbol for that degree is a man turning his back on his passion and teaching from his experience.
And I don't know if you said this yet, Jim, but he imagined that the hand of God, the hand of the slaves of the people were blocking out the light of the sun, meaning, which is really what's happening when we have an eclipse. Yeah. The moon, the people, symbolically, are blocking out the light of the patriarchy. And we know this is a time that oftentimes rulerships, royalty, dictators are overthrown or attempts at rebellion occur.
Yeah, so we have, in addition to the sun, moon in 23, we have Eris at 21, Haumea at 20, Uranus at 11, Jupiter at 5. So we got a nice little cluster here in Aquarius. We got Athena, Neptune, and Mercury in Capricorn.
Amazing.
Mars in Taurus. We got South Node Venus and Sedna in Pisces.
What it says Nat at 26 Leo, is that his son?
The 23 Leo, what do you mean, 26 Leo?
26 Leo, it says Nat.
Oh, Nat, that's his, that is the asteroid Nathaniel.
Oh, thank you. So you brought in Nathaniel's asteroid, which is coming to conjunct
Saturn.
Saturn and the North Node.
That's what I put in there.
The mouth of the dragon.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's really interesting. You brought in that. That's a great chart. I didn't.
Of lately when I've been doing charts, I've been looking to see if there is a named asteroid for that person I'm doing the chart for, and if there is, then I put that asteroid in their chart to see what's going on.
Amazing.
Okay. Here we go. Here's the big one. Solar eclipse coming up on April 8th. It's from Saros Series 139 or 8 North. This eclipse series started May 17th of 1501. And the last one will be on June 23rd of 2745. So the Saros series of the eclipse family runs for some 1250 years, give or take. They vary in length and will include somewhere between 70 and 72 typically solar eclipses. Now, this is from Bernadette Brady's book, Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark. It's the closest thing to a Bible you can find on solar eclipses with most information.
Yeah.
The aspects talks about are the aspects for the first eclipse in the series. So there was a new moon eclipse squaring Uranus, also on the midpoint of Mercury, the Mercury-Venus midpoint. Pluto holds a powerful position as it occupies the midpoint of Venus, the Venus-Saturn midpoint, as well as the new moon node midpoint. In addition, there is a Mars-Mercury square with Mars on the new moon Neptune midpoint. So the new moon equals Uranus equals Mercury Venus. Pluto equals Venus Saturn midpoint. and new moon node midpoint. Mars equals Mercury, which equals the new moon Neptune midpoint. Basic sense of this eclipse family is inventiveness and flashes of genius are the hallmark of this series. The individual will have intuitive leaps, insights, good ideas, visions, or vivid dreams. This newfound inspiration will pull the person away from his or her social life or relationship, thereby causing strain in the private life. This is the time when the person needs to be free, if only for a few weeks. And then you get a list of the eclipses in this family during the period from 1900 to 2050. So, yeah, anybody born in 1934, 52, 1970, 88, 2006, born early in the year, or born slightly later in the year, this eclipse family may be your prenatal eclipse. That is the solar eclipse prior to your birth. Here's a chart. What I find most interesting to me is the fact that Chiron is also at 19 Aries 24.
Oh
Exact point
dear.
of the eclipse. I
All three of them are conjunct my Uranus in the 10th house.
Now there you go. It's gonna be a good one for you.
Finds my Jupiter in Leo in the second, so I'm having high hopes.
Yes.
Now it opposes my Chiron at 20 Libra. So, but we also have Eris and Mercury conjunct at 24 Aries. And let's see. So it's
Wait a
going to
minute.
be
Mercury's conjunct what?
Eris at
Eris.
24 Aries.
Eris. And what's that?
20 here. Eris is the goddess of discord. She's the
Yes.
sister of Mars.
Right.
Yeah. So
Overthrows the
We're gonna-
apple cart. She's the, really challenges with ideas, challenges authority.
mhm.
That's
We have
me.
Cor-
yeah.
That's what my book does.
Yeah.
Challenges the third.
And what is it? April 20th, I think it is when we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. We got that coming up after the eclipse.
Mhm.
We have a Mars-Saturn conjunction over here in Pisces. So there's a lot going on, and it's all concentrated up here, the 9th, 10th, and 11th houses. So,
Oh, if you're in Los Angeles.
yes, in LA.
Hey, Cornelia,
But
how does this configuration in Aries affect your chart for the United States?
the only thing I really noticed about it was the fact that the South Node is sitting on Trump's Jupiter in his second house. So I figured that would be pretty bad. But as far as mine and there isn't anything except that there's a Neptune moon conjunction in Libra in the 5th house.
Well, Aries is going to oppose Libra.
Right.
So what do you think that would mean? If Aries is appointing a Libra, will this be and Libra's in the South Node here? Do you think that this will bring about more well, we've got the goddess of chaos here, and the
Eris,
sister of
yes.
Mars,
Eris.
and Mars is up there.
We're going to have a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going into a summer of discord and disruption, of chaos.
Yes.
In fact, oh crap, we're about
Well,
ready
in
to
my
go into
in my American chart, all Aries is intercepted in the 11th house, which is a house of representatives.
Yeah.
If we would be wanting to look at the spring, we'd look at the Aries ingress too, which is, spring and the rest of the year.
Mhm.
Right. And that
Yeah.
becomes a point later on in 25 and 26. I think it's the what they call the Aries point. It's when Neptune and Saturn hit 0 Aries.
Ah.
And it forms a wedge with the sextile with Pluto on one side and Uranus on the other side.
Okay. Right. I'm gonna have to quickly run along here. So here's a chart. This map shows the line of totality as the eclipse starts over here in the Pacific, cuts up across Mexico, across Texas, Arkansas, southern Illinois, Indiana, northern Ohio, and then cuts up, kind of going up along the St. Lawrence, cutting off like so.
Well, it's going to affect Washington, isn't it?
Yeah. So this first pair of lines, that's a 75 percentile. And this is the 50 percentile. So we will be, clear skies permitting, we will be able to see it with proper viewing equipment. Get your
Great.
glasses. But again, it's going to be visible throughout the United States
Yeah.
to some
it's-
extent.
Totality is 4 minutes. The one I saw in Oregon was 2.5 minutes. So it's a big
Yeah.
deal.
I'm going to be sending out a link to an article. I think it's a NASA article that talks about some of the best places to see the eclipse if you want to go see the line, be in the line of totality.
Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh well. Uh,
Dominique and her
all right.
mother are going to Texas so they could see it.
All right. All right. So next up, here's the Ring of Fire eclipse from October 14th of last year. Sarah Series 134 and 7 South. The immense power, anger, and force of the Mars square Pluto is channeled into this family of eclipses via the trine. The individual experiencing this series will find that huge obstacles will suddenly and easily clear, or on the negative side, a pending potential crisis will suddenly manifest and move through his or her life very rapidly. Either way, the individual feel that everything is moving at great speed. And again, we have a list of the eclipses, the years of when this family of eclipses occurred. And here's the chart. So this one is at 21 Libra 8. And the way to work with eclipses is you look to see where does the eclipse happen, what degree, what sign, and then figure out where is that in your chart, and what is it doing to your natal chart? What aspects does it make the natal planet?
Oh, geez. I said, oh, geez, because Jim knows my chart.
Well, we had a happy war that started on the 7th and was going lickety split by the time we had that.
Yeah, and it hasn't let up.
And
Here's the
in
map.
my chart, it filled in my T-square and made a grand cross.
There you go. All right, so here's the chart for the eclipse, and this one comes in off the Oregon coast, cuts across Nevada, Utah, the Four Corners, New Mexico, and then cuts Texas again out into the Gulf. Here's a picture, a little too big from, oops, sorry, back up. Have to fix that. Here we go. Where am I? No. There's a picture of the eclipse. That's why it's called a ring of fire. The moon was farther away from the Earth at the time of this new moon, which is why it didn't completely block the sun and create a total eclipse. Instead, there was a halo around the moon, or a ring of fire. All right, now going back to that total eclipse in August of 2017. Unexpected events involving friends or groups place a great deal of pressure on personal relationships. These relationship issues may loom large as the eclipse affects the chart. The individual would be wise not to make any hasty decisions since information is distorted and possibly false. The eclipse also has an essence of tiredness or health problems attached to it. The chart, that summer eclipse was at 28 Leo 53.
It's right on Trump's ascendant.
Yes. And this
And what
was a few
happened?
months, about 8 months after he was inaugurated. 7 or 8 months, 8 months. We have Jupiter conjunct Haumea in the 12th, again for LA. Uranus, Eris conjunction over in Aries. T-square, Uranus, Eris to Haumea, Jupiter, and Venus at the pinnacle. So Venus squaring, creating that T-square.
It's interesting because my chart has Saturn at 16 Capricorn.
Okay.
So we got Pluto.
Yeah. Pluto on your Saturn. Yeah. So now and then here is the map showing how that eclipse came in off the Oregon coast, cut across Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, Tennessee, and went out, bisected South Carolina, and went out into the Atlantic. You can see how this eclipse cuts America in half, north and south.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a photo from the eclipse. This little thing over here is like a solar flare popping out.
And what happened in Oregon was, it was the start of the two locations, Oregon and South Carolina, were the two entry points of the coronavirus into the United States. And there
Yeah.
were tremendous fires in the Pacific Northwest, riots, Black Lives Matter movement in Portland, Oregon, 60 days of riots straight.
Mm-hmm. And you had some
121-degree temperatures in Washington and Oregon.
and there were some right-wing survivalists
Ugh.
that was it Oregon, Washington, where they took over a state park or something and held
Seattle.
it
Oh, no,
at Seattle. Yeah, so there's all kinds of unrest
Yeah.
going on. All right, what I attempted to do here. Okay, so this line is the image is actually the April 8th eclipse showing that line. This line is an approximation of the excuse me, total eclipse of August 21st of 17. And here's the line for the one from last year, October 14th. And you notice how it's just kind of like cutting up the United States, trying to divide the pie, but not doing a good job of dividing it equally.
Certainly.
Well, there's a great big X over Texas. Not only the two solar eclipses
Yeah.
of 17 and 24 make the symbol of the Confederate flag across the nation, the big X. And Texas is looking at seceding from the Union.
Yeah, and you got another X over here in southeastern Missouri.
Oh, yeah. What is that? Kansas City or no?
That would be
No,
down
no.
in the St. Louis area.
St. Louis. Oh, yes.
Yeah, St. Louis is down here,
Okay.
close to Illinois.
Yeah.
And here,
There you go. That's
I
what
took
I'm
another
talking.
map. This is the results of the 2020 presidential election of red states and blue states, and I put the lines in again. And you can see how some of it, yeah, obviously between the 24 eclipse and the 17 eclipse, it kind of like cuts off New England. The South with Georgia, which was a bit of a fluke going Republican, is predominantly red. You've got this, red section in the middle. You got mostly blue over here.
Or going
So
Democrat.
it's
Well,
all quite interesting.
yeah,
Yes,
and
it
also
is.
the line cutting up to the original 13 colonies and the border with Canada.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an issue.
Mhm.
Again, poor Oregon has had tumultuous times, and Texas has been, the border issues. It has having escalating rates of gun violence, the worst in the nation. There's a bunch of
Mhm.
issues in Texas. It's a huge border crossing area.
I'm surprised they
It's
haven't allowed 6-year-olds to carry guns.
Well, I think you can at this point
Mhm.
because no one is required to have a license.
Right.
yeah,
So yeah,
uh,
yeah, you can.
yeah,
You don't like your teacher? Boom, boom, boom.
it's very interesting how there's been a lot of articles written about the psychology of these mega supporters and
Yeah.
about the Christian nationalists, the evangelical right-wing Christians,
Yeah.
which is a bit fascinating to read, trying to
Yeah.
figure out why people believe what they believe. There's this disconnect from the facts.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
I gotta
science
go.
and facts are irrelevant anymore. It's about, what do you want to believe? I mean, if you want to believe the earth is flat, it's flat. Okay. If you want to believe that, you know, God appointed Trump to be the man on earth now, then I guess he is.
I gotta run.
Okay, run.
I'm running overtime, and I want to make sure you send me a copy of this presentation because it
Yeah,
was
I'll get.
beautiful, and I thank you so much for your hard work, man. You really
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I will.
all right.
There's a couple
And
of
you
things I
too.
saw that I need to clean up, but
Well, Karina
um,
did a great job. I mean, these are things that I didn't know so much about some of these women, except Sacagawea, because she was where my mother's anyway. Bye bye.
thanks,
Bye.
Pat. See ya.
Bye bye.
Tally ho. All right. I tried coming up with some thoughts on the three eclipses, and it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, they do reflect some of the divisions I think going on within the United States at this time. It's kind of like the as above, so below. They do reflect a chaotic 24 election that may take some time to resolve. And they symbolize the many differences, religious, political, economic, theological, and others that exist in the United States at this time. And the August 17 eclipse divided the U.S. on a north-south line. October 23 seemed to cut off the west-southwest from the rest of the U.S. And the one that's coming up is going to divide the northeast, east, and south from the Midwest and the West. And both of them, the last two, of course, cut Texas up. So uh, who knows? Next month we have Cornelia talking about her book. Yay. May, I don't know. Do we want to? I mean, Mother's Day. Normal second Sunday is May 12th, and that's Mother's Day. So we
Oh,
could do the
I'd
5th.
like that one. Yeah.
You want to do it on the 12th, or do you want to celebrate Mother's Day?
No, I'm just, to me, that's an interesting one because we have this discussion going on. Does the moon really represent the mother? And the way
Yeah.
I see it is the moon represents your perception of the mother
Mm.
Ah, okay.
growing
That's
up.
interesting. Yes. Well, yeah. So I thought what we would talk about would be finding the mother in your chart.
Yeah.
Tim, I really wanted to talk about labor history for May Day.
Oh, okay. We can bring in labor history.
Yeah, because it's just
Father's Day is
the
who's your daddy?
timing. Yeah. It's
Uh,
also of the era. We have so many strikes going on. We have 49 elections across the globe this year. Labor rights, human rights. It's a really,
Yes.
yeah. Hmm. Yes,
yes.
I don't. Yeah, I forget. I think of Mother's Day and I forget about Labor Day. Okay, yeah. So those are some ideas we got going. But we're always there. Everything's subject to change. But next month we're set. Thank you all so very much for coming.
Thank you.
We got through it.
Very
We stuck with
interesting.
it.
Good research, Jim. Nice
You.
slides.
Thank you, Tim, for all your help.
Rachel, Angie,
Yeah.
and Patrita, thank you. Cornelia, thank you. I'm really looking forward to next month.
Me too.
Katerina, thank you for your help.
Yes, I love that research.
We'll
I'm such a nerd.
yeah, we'll get this figured out better for next month.
Oh, it's wonderful, Jim. It's great.
Oh,
Okay.
there's an article of mine on Mountain Astrologer's blog
Mhm.
on child development on the work I did on children. So you could look at
Okay.
that.
Oh, that would be great.
For Mountain
Congratulations.
Astrologers, great, thank you. We will
Yep.
take a look at that. Okay, everybody.
Okay.
I'm going to stop recording.
Say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. And you can now free to, I think it stopped.
Okay.
Or I can stop it if it
Stop
didn't.
recording. There we go.
Okay.